Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Earn It podcast, making it to and through nursing school. I am your host. Today is Friday, March 14th. Happy Pi Day. And on today's episode, why shouldn't new nurses be too stressed about med errors? Coming right up. All right, so I know it might sound a little bit strange to be told as a new nurse not to be too stressed out about med errors, but I got my cup of coffee here and we're going to talk a little bit about why you shouldn't be worried too much. I know, it's nerve-wracking, especially for you folks that are maybe even doing your preceptorship in nursing school, but maybe you're just finishing up your last semester. I don't know. Or maybe you're in the beginning of nursing school and you're worried about all I hear is about how important it is to not make mistakes. And I know how easy it is to make a mistake, or at least you should be aware by now how easy it could be to make a mistake and how major the consequences are. So you're worried that you're not going to be able to do it and you're going to make a huge mistake out of school. Well, you shouldn't worry too much about that. So should you always worry about med errors? Yes, but you shouldn't be overly stressed that you're more prone to make some kind of med error mistake as a new grad or as a new nurse or as a preceptor or as a student because the data does not show that new nurses are more prone to this. The data in the studies have actually shown that new nurses are more meticulous with medication passes than experienced. And this kind of makes some sense, at least to me. I don't know how counterintuitive it is for a lot of other folks, but think about it this way. The longer that you do something, the more that you become accustomed to it. So your first, few months as a new nurse, you're so heightened. Your awareness is so heightened because you're so worried about it, right? You are still in the mode. I think that this kind of bleeds over from the mentality that you have to have through nursing school, which is that mistakes are kind of high pressure. And honestly, med errors should be higher pressure than anything that you face in nursing school. If you're, more worried about an exam than giving somebody the wrong medication and killing them, then you probably should not be going into the nursing field. But again, if you think about it critically, this only really becomes terribly prevalent after you've been doing this a while. Why? Because you're a lot more comfortable. So you might, pass meds and collect meds and divvy out medications at your nurse's station while you're sitting there talking to your friend after a few years. You shouldn't do that, but some people get really comfortable and they're able to do that. Some people, they're texting their husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend while they're at the med cart or something, in between all that. So your awareness is kind of not as heightened whenever you're a more experienced nurse. So if anything, if you should be too stressed about anything, it's becoming too comfortable too fast, or actually just too comfortable at all. One way that I'd like to think about it is maybe you shouldn't ever feel comfortable while doing medication passes or drawing up medications to be given to a patient. Maybe that should never make you feel 100% comfortable because you never know that med pass that you're doing, if that's going to be the one that costs someone their life and costs you your career and possibly your freedom. But again, as a new nurse, you shouldn't be super duper worried that because, I'm a new, so I'm more likely to make a med error. That's not the case. Forget the triple check. You're probably checking the thing like 5 or 6 times as a new nurse. You're telling people, I'm sorry, I need to not talk to you while this is happening. Because you don't want to screw up. You don't want to kill somebody. Even if you're the most selfish person in the world, even if that's the case, you don't want to mess up your livelihood and potentially get locked up, right? So, excuse me, don't worry too much about it. Now, here's a way that kind of in the long term, if you want to really, I guess, first of all, it's a time to build good habits right now. But I think another reason why it becomes more of an issue is that people don't, and this is not the the fault of any nurse per se. It's not the fault of any healthcare worker, but it's hard to stay patient oriented instead of task oriented. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, at some point when you get over the super duper fear of messing up, killing somebody, losing your job, going to jail, all of that, or like, oh, I'm new, so I don't know anything. When you will get to a point where you are comfortable, and it will happen probably within your first year of becoming a nurse. Lord forbid it happens during your preceptorship. Especially if you know that that's where you're going to work later on. You're probably just going to become comfortable at some point, very soon in the future. And when that happens, now you go from, oh my gosh, to, I have to get all of this shit done in this short amount of time while all this crazy shit is happening. And I have people, that are unpleasant. And I have people that are constantly needing to be watched. I have somebody that should be a one-on-one, but they're not a one-on-one because who knows why we can't seem to, get our shit together as a healthcare industry and, really get patients the care that they need. But the fact of it is there aren't enough resources in a lot of cases, right? So you might be understaffed. There might be a lot of reasons. And so what patients become is basically a kind of a container of a long list of tasks that need to be performed before the end of your shift, or by certain times in your shift. It no longer at a certain point, it can become no longer a patient that you have to take care of like they're a loved one of yours. And it has to be, oh, I have to do A through F before 9 a.m. My shift starts at 7. Well, I have 5 or 6 patients to do that with. At some point it becomes task oriented. And at that point is when your brain is going to separate that patient from the tasks that need to be performed. And the medication, drawing up medication, is now no longer patient-centered. It now no longer has a patient tied to it somewhere in the depths of your brain. What that is it's a medication pass, right? It's a medication administration that has to be done. I'm doing air quotes. I know you can't see the air quotes. It becomes a thing that has to be done. And at that point, that's when things begin to get a little bit dangerous if you're not careful. So you should just keep it in mind every day before you go to work. You need to actively realize that what you're taking care of is patients, not tasks. Tasks should come second to patient comfort, pain levels, just the way that they are feeling. And you need to realize that what you're trying to do is get somebody better and get them discharged from whatever facility that you're in, or get them feeling better in some kind of way before they leave. Okay? So try to stop yourself, again, from being task-oriented. These are people, not tasks. Another interesting thing that I found in my research recently, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. All right. So another thing is double checking by another person, right? So a lot of, and I've worked at facilities like this before, and I can talk a little bit about my experience of kind of the last couple things that I've said, which is, more experience comes more comfort and comes more possibility for mistakes. Okay, I've been a medical assistant for, I think I'm going on my 10th year now. So I'm just going to talk about this. I used to work somewhere where every medication that you drew up, especially if it was injectable, you had to have another person check. Now, here's the issue with this. It's not always possible because of staffing. Or B, the person that you asked to do it is going to be very busy and they're going to half-ass it. So then you're going to feel extra comfortable that someone else checked it. It could still be wrong. Okay. So the studies have shown that there are no statistically significant impact on another staff member double checking your medication. It does not significantly reduce. Let me say this. Statistically speaking, there is no impact whatsoever on someone else double checking your medication before you give it. This comes from a lot of different factors. But the fact of it is, it's been studied and the numbers are not statistically different. Okay? It's just not a thing. Should that be eradicated because it's taking up more time for no reason? No. No, because I mean, the more the merrier, right? But again, if you work at a facility where that happens, obviously get that second set of eyes on there, and you shouldn't feel super duper mega ultra comfortable with that person double checking that, right? So again, let me kind of explain this. The reason why these things have come up in the list for this episode to talk about is because I've realized this over the years of working is that more comfortable people make more mistakes. I don't know. But for some reason, us entering a new field, we're worried about making those mistakes. But it's that worry that's going to help prevent us from making those mistakes, guys. That's the thing, is that the more, to a certain extent, the more afraid you are, the less likely you are to make a mistake because the more careful you're going to be, right? Hopefully this is making sense for you guys. However, you can be too stressed. That's why in my intro I said, why shouldn't new nurses be too stressed about medication errors? Because if you're overly stressed, then your brain is working even faster. And even if you think that you're being extra careful, what you're doing is you're just doing things extra fast. Or you have paralysis by analysis and you're sitting there looking at the medication and you're sitting there looking at the medication order and they are correct, but something doesn't seem right to you even though it is. So then you're just like, okay, what's going on here? And then you double check the dose and then you recalculate. And then maybe you're so nervous that you calculate it incorrectly once, and then incorrectly again. Too much stress is too much for a reason, right? You can make mistakes just from being overly nervous, overly stressed. You can miss something because you're worried about getting it all kinds of things. You can underdose somebody because you're afraid of overdosing them. Like you can forget information because there's so much cortisol coursing through and adrenaline coursing through your veins that your brain, your eye just skips over things. So in that extent, you could make a medication error. But okay, guys, generally stop worrying so much, especially you first, second semester people. You're far away from being alone with Pyxis, drawing up a bunch of medication and giving them by yourself, being the sole person responsible for it. So enjoy it now. Look at the nurses, the preceptors, everybody that you're with, and look and try to identify any bad habit. One of them might be that they're just the simple fact that they're trying to explain shit to you while they're drawing up morphine. They shouldn't be explaining anything to you while they're drawing up anything. They shouldn't be talking. You know, in the aviation industry, they have something, at least in commercial airlines, it's called sterile cockpit, and so I believe it's 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet. I'm not really sure. I could look that up literally really quickly. But basically, for a certain amount of time, there's a time before you take off where there is no talking until you're a certain height in the air. And I mean talking about anything else. Like there is no, hey, how is your day? How is this? Oh, the weather. None of that is allowed. All this is being recorded. You do it, you're out. Okay? Because they found that it caused mistakes when your attention is diverted, right? And actually some hospitals and some healthcare organizations are adopting the same kind of communication and standard operating procedures that the aviation industry and transportation, Department of Defense, all the military. There's a certain communication method that's used, and certain communication procedures that are used. And I'm bringing up communication because it's a major cause for medication errors, by the way. But there's certain principles that ensure mistakes are very, very minimal. That's why when you hear about a plane crash, it's on the news, right? If it does every single car accident happen, that happens on the news. Is it all on the news? No, not always. Not even close to always. There's so many fender benders that it'll make your head spin. If there was that many fender benders for airplanes, you would never fly in an airplane, right? There's a reason why there are so little mistakes in the military and in aviation, and that's because they have communication stairs. One of those, again, getting right back around to it, is stereo cockpit. So when you're in that med room, you shouldn't be talking about anything if you can help it. Now, obviously, in the real world, you might have a scenario where you have to, but again, you just have to make sure to be extra careful, or pretend like you didn't just do your 3 checks and do them freaking all over again or something. You need to be really careful. Hopefully those get around to all healthcare. Hopefully those get around to all healthcare organizations, because it really is, it saves a lot of people's lives. And maybe I'll make a whole episode on that, because I think there needs to be more awareness of that kind of communication style. I forgot that there's a standardized name for it. I don't even remember what it's called. Anyway, so again, communication, that brings us to communication, which is another cause for medication errors, right? Especially when you're taking verbal orders. Just because there are standards set in place for you when taking verbal orders, right? You have to read it back to them. They have to sign it within 24 hours. You have to put that it was a verbal order. You have to actually read it back to them. When you get more comfortable, you get in the swing of things. You could have very well not read it back to the provider, but charted that you did, because you're just so used to doing it, but you were just busy that day, so you skipped over it, but you always do it, right? And it's a dot phrase. So you're just going to put in there that you spoke to the provider and you repeated it back. There's a lot of things that you can misunderstand. Just because there are standards in place doesn't mean you should rely on them like they're somehow separate from. What I mean by that is, you have a certain routine that you do to check medications, and those generally follow standards that we learn, right? The 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 34 rights of medication administration, all that stuff. Just because that stuff exists doesn't mean that you're safe from making a mistake. And so that's why you need to realize it, and that's why you need to continue to be extra careful. So basically, don't lose that little bit of fear that you have, and you will be fine. And realize that you should be more afraid the longer that you're a nurse, not the other way around. So that's really it. It's kind of an interesting way to hopefully think about it. Take some fear away from it, because really you're going to end up catching a lot of mistakes from other experienced nurses. So thanks so much for listening to the Earn It Podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please follow so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes and not have to spend time searching for it, because no one wants to do that. If you would like to come on the podcast to chat for a Q&A session, please click the link in the description of this episode and fill out the very, very short form. Again, thanks so much for listening. Go out there today and earn it.